You can be the toughest, badass special forces guy and have 20 combat deployments and have gone through all of this training. When your children are ripped from your lives, is a feeling that you can never prepare for.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with the SEAL. Today's guest is a retired Recon Marine and Naval intelligence officer, including 4 combat deployments and leadership in pivotal missions across Afghanistan, East Africa, and the Middle East. He co-authored Left of Bang and played a key role in establishing the U.S. Navy Irregular Warfare Office, earning recognition as an expert in social culture analysis. As founder of President Inodo Global Inc., he now leads a global business intelligence firm tackling social risks and complex issues for Fortune 100 companies and major institutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited to introduce you to Jim Sisco. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, Gina, it's a pleasure. I look forward to having a great conversation and sharing some really cool stories and insights.
I'm going to go right here. Normally, I'm like, let's go to the beginning. But no, I want to talk about your YouTube channel. You got this YouTube channel. It's called The War Journal. And what I find super interesting is that it's like your diaries that you're then talking about, you know, and sharing with us. And they're so raw. They're so personal. And the one I really like was like, God, this is like a movie and soap opera and TV show, like all in one. Was it Death and Betrayal? Is that the title? Yep.
Episode 17, Death and Betrayal.
Episode 17. Yeah. I was in it. I was invested. I was like, oh my God. It was like drop after drop. There was stuff coming. And, you know, I find it really interesting that you're taking your like personal stuff and, you know, sharing them with people and what you've went through. I mean, you know, in special ops and, you know, now running businesses and all that stuff doesn't seem to compare to when personal life. I feel like we're way more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like this could be just an opinion, but I'm way more affected with my immediate family and things that go on personally than like something that happens at work, you know, like, and I want to talk about, I wanted to mention right away that because I wanted to let our listeners know when you finish this episode of the podcast, please go check out the War Journals. Episode 17, though, is going to really hook you in, but they're all pretty fantastic. And I want to talk about, let's talk about that I really want to, episode 17, just like, I kind of really just want to dive into the fact that like you're in war, right? You have these buddies, you know, people pass away, all this stuff, all these things that you go through, especially in special ops. It is a lot of mental toughness. It's a lot of grit. It's a lot to get to where you are. And then when you're in combat, it's a whole nother world, right? A whole nother mindset, right? Why don't we talk about that and the mindset that you have to develop there? And then let's talk about the mindset in the civilian world and the stuff that you now had to go through in episode 17 and then what you're going through today.
Let me just say this. You were spot on. When the War Journal was my journal when I was in Desert Storm. I was a 20-year-old kid in special ops and got a care package in the mail, and I just started journaling every day. So what you said was right. Here you have this very authentic, raw, you know, not educated kid who has all of these experiences and emotions, and I'm just journaling them. And then I, did a podcast and I shared the journal. And the woman who was doing the podcast, Marianne, said, let me take this to my publicist. And she read it and she said, you got to write this book. And I did. And the War Journal podcast is my way of sharing all of these things and experiences with people so they don't make the same mistakes that I made throughout my life. And I believe episode 17 is probably one of the most visceral because it deals with these emotions that not only do you deal with in the military, but in civilian life and, that common everyday people deal with. So thanks for plugging that. Happy to talk about, my time in special forces, which I don't really consider myself a special forces operator. I was in Marine Recon. It was special forces, but just a normal guy in a lot of ways. I play rugby. Don't consider myself like a lot of people who are in the special forces community as special. I have so much respect for the infantry guys, the Rangers, the people who have served in World War One, two, Korea. They're the real heroes. What I did was just a segment in time.
First of all, by the way, in your 20s, writing so raw, and not only like that, but the stuff you saw and the stuff that you went through, like, oh my gosh, like that, in the 20s, like it's just like I was just talking to someone the other day. I was speaking at a Rotary Club, and the person was like, "You grow up so fast when you go into the service. Like you just grow up ridiculously fast, and there's so much responsibility, and there's so much training and so much stuff that you go through as a young adult, And let's talk about, first of all, what made you go this route? What made you go this route? And then what are some of the stuff that you developed or lessons that you learned that helped you prepare for your combat, or that just you learned throughout it?
I joined the military because I really didn't have a very sound childhood. My father was married 3 times. My mother was married 4 times. I really didn't have a good direction, mentors, anything like that. Struggled in school, not because I wasn't smart, because I just didn't apply myself. So I knew that I couldn't go to college, and I decided that I was going to join the military. And I looked around and I really didn't know about the SEALs or special forces at the time. I was kind of enamored by the Marine Corps and their uniforms and dress blues, and found out about Recon, and that was it. I made up my mind and nothing was going to stop me. Joined the Marine Corps and on September 11th, 1986, the irony of that, and was off to Paris Island, graduated boot camp as honor grad. I was just, gung ho Marine, and took the Recon indoc. 78 people were in my indoc class. I think 6 finally made it. And
Wow. How long was that process?
well, the Recon indoc was a 1 day
Oh,
just torture
okay.
session. You show up in the morning and you get off the bus and they're squirting you with water and hoses and yelling at you. You do a packed run, obstacle course, swim portion, all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, we had 6 guys left, and those were the ones who got orders to Recon. I think that was the initial introduction to special forces for me. But really, when I got to Recon Battalion, we had 30 days of RIP Recon indoctrination program. And then after that, I was off to Amphibious Reconnaissance School, which is kind of the buds for Marines. And that sucked, I'm not going to lie. But that was really where I was tested, and kind of I knew I was resilient, after boot camp and the things I dealt with. But really, that was the kind of the time that I developed that resilience and fortitude that really kind of defined my character.
What did you go through that developed that?
So at ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School, was in Little Creek, Virginia, and it was on a compound, isolated, and not a lot of people, know about ARS. Everybody's like talks about Buds and Hell Week. Imagine Hell Week for a couple months. It was a protracted campaign of misery. You're running everywhere on the compound. You have your sling rope and stew eyes. You're always in the water, and you're in these classrooms soaking wet. And I think the coolest point I remember is we went to cold. It was November, so it sucked. But the cool part was we went to Amphib Phase down in Key West, and that was great. Like I said, that was probably the time that I developed that resilience. And then going back to Recon Battalion, in RIP, you were just tortured the whole time. So it was just a constant campaign of abuse, and and you just got through it, and everybody did.
Did you ever think about quitting?
No,
Never want to?
no,
No,
not at all.
never crossed your mind. How many people did you see a lot of people drop out and go and throughout it?
In RIP, we saw, well, in doc, I saw a significant amount of people drop out. In RIP, there was only a handful. In ARS, there was a handful, and those were medical and similar to, the SEALs where you get dropped for things like that. It was not a lot of people like rang the bell or quit. And because we were such a small unit in our classes and we went through RIP together and we knew each other. So you really had more of that teamwork, camaraderie, esprit de corps, especially being Marines. And it
Yeah.
wasn't individual. So I think that was why, not as many people, kind of dropped out, DOR'd.
When I went to the Navy SEAL prep program, one of the lessons that Coach Mack would always say to get, because he was training these candidates to go to BUDS, and he would be like, the teammate next to you is always more important than you. Like, you guys need to understand teamwork. If you are in it as one person, you're not going to make it through. And it took me over a month to understand what the heck that meant, And as you're talking about that, I think it's really interesting because once I learned it, I was a whole new person. Like, when you learn teamwork, it doesn't suck as much. You're not thinking about quitting as much because it's like, it sucks. But at least you're all sucking. Like, it's like you're all miserable, and you then, like, once you realize that, like, you just have this bond with each other. It was like, so it's really funny because I go to Los Angeles for a holiday, and I lived there for 10 years, and I was working for Penny Marshall, and that house just was like hell. And the housekeeper and I just like bonded, right? And we get together every time I'm in town because, like, you have this unbreakable bond when you go through hell together, right? It's like, that's it. And you never want to let each other down. It's like, I don't want to leave and quit because I don't want to leave you. Like, I want to go through this together. And there's that I guess for you, like, there's that brotherhood, and I'm sure that helped you tremendously. Now, did teamwork always, like, how did that get ingrained for you guys to know that right away instead of it being individual?
I think it was over time. I mean, everybody has their own story. When you get to Recon, everybody comes from different locations and areas. They have their own, stories. Some were like a baseball player. This guy was this. You have your own identity, life, whatever it is. But then you're thrown in the mix together, and all that kind of goes away. Like, even in boot camp, there's no African Americans or Chinese or Asians or this or that. You're all green. And the Marine Corps does a really good job of stripping that identity and creating that Marine identity. And then the same thing happens when you get to Recon Battalion. I have like hundreds of stories I can tell about the things that I experienced, that kind of made you bond together. But it was just, you're living together on Onslow Beach, you're isolated from everybody. And, we had our own barracks, our own chow hall, our own NCO club. It was just like, that became your family.
How long, by the way, I didn't think I mentioned this about, how long were you in service?
My total combined time was 23 years, a little over 23 years. It was almost 5 years in the Marine Corps, and then I got out, went to college, and then 18 plus in the Navy as an intelligence officer.
So what made you make that switch?
Read the war journal and you'll see. I mean, I loved my time in the Marine Corps, and I went through officer candidate school and actually won the Commandant's Trophy, which is the top national graduate for officer candidates. I had planned on going back into the Marine Corps as an officer. A bunch of things happened at a flight contract and eye test, and coincidence, I'm walking by the Navy recruiter and he's like, "Hey, come on in, what's going on?" And I told him, and he's like, "Well, we got a spot for you in the Navy." And I'm down in Pensacola, Florida, going through Navy officer candidate school after I won the Commandant's Trophy for the Marine Corps, and that kind of set my course. And I did my first tour at a SEAL team. Really loved being there at the teams. It was like, now I'm an officer. I'm back at the teams. It was fun. I didn't have to go through BUDS or anything. I was just was assigned there. But that's not what I wanted to do. It wasn't me. It wasn't my identity anymore. I was a little older, probably 25, 26. Didn't want to, the allure of like tromping through the woods with all my gear and guns and stuff like that, and kicking doors down and playing with explosives. I had done that, and I didn't have the thrill. It didn't do it for me anymore. And naval intelligence was a way that I could apply what I had learned in a larger kind of scale, in a macro scale. You can kill one guy shooting him, or you can sway and influence the course of a community or population, and that was more alluring to me.
So let's talk about from episode 17, right? And in general, the war journals, it's your 20s, right? It's like over a span of time. Why don't you briefly give us like, what exactly that episode like was about? Because I don't want to give up too much away. I really want people to go and listen. But the thing that I find really interesting is like what you went through and like discovered and all this other stuff. Like, how do you trust again, and B, how do you push that aside to complete the job and the task and all the things you have to do? Like, when your not allowing your personal life to bleed into your work life when what just happened to you is so intertwined.
I don't want to give away what happened, but
Right.
let's put it into perspective. We're a couple days away from the start of the ground war. We had been doing missions up and down the border for the past month, moving every day, high tempo. And I'm bouncing around where I'm going to go. Am I going to be in a team? Am I going to be back in headquarters? What, my role. And we have this event occur. So this event happens. For everyone who hasn't listened, or if they're going to listen, I don't want to spoil it. Just imagine one of the most tragic things happening to you in your life. A death of a friend or of a family member, or a sibling, and then within an hour, another tragic event of the same or greater magnitude happening. Dealing with those two things, and then the next day, you're on a team, you're in a team, and you're heading into combat. And I've spoken with a lot of people, not only military guys, but my friends. And what I did, what a lot of men do, we compartmentalized it. Mm-hmm. I put it in a box. I don't have time to deal with this. I'm going to combat. And that was the only way that I dealt with it. And it was a very effective tool that I've used throughout my life of compartmentalizing things that are very, something tragic or hurtful. So that's how I was able to manage that.
I have to ask this one because I am not a compartmentalizer. I don't know how to do it. It's like something happens and it's just, I could still complete the task at hand, but that doesn't mean that I'm not thinking or, having those emotions kind of like come up, And by the way, like what, in your life, again, I'm not going to spoil it for people, but there's also betrayal in this journal and stuff like that, right? From close friends and family and, whoever, coworkers, whatever. Like, how do you trust again after like discovering like something so hurtful from like someone betraying your trust and going to work again, because if it's, how does that work for you?
You don't. I mean, at a certain level, you're not able to trust. And I knew that after my time in Desert Storm, I was changed dramatically. The way I interacted with women, my relationships with women, it took a while. And even in my marriage, I never really had that trust. So I don't think you ever recover. You find ways to deal with it. You find ways to circumvent it or kind of manage it. But I don't think and I think a lot of people struggle with that, and they turn to drugs or alcohol or whatever because they have a hard time dealing with that, and I never really spoke to anybody about it. I think a lot of people are now like very, inclined to go get a therapist and, talk to somebody or have a counselor or have a support group. That didn't exist. Remember, this is 1991, a lot different back then. Mental health issues weren't even a concern. Here's your mental health issue advice. Put some dirt on it. Rub some dirt on it. It'll be okay. There's a lot more resources today, but I don't believe in my heart that people recover from that or able to heal from that. It's like, as people talk about trauma bonding and things like that, it's just going to be a part of your identity forever.
Now, did you have any vices or coping, or it was just like, I'm going to compartmentalize and move forward? Or was there any other things?
Yeah, I never turned to like I didn't like taste of beer. Never drank. Was my dad was not a drinker. I mean, chewed tobacco, but that's not really advice. I didn't really have any vices. I worked out. I loved working out. I enjoyed it, and that was my release. And I still work out every day, and that is my release. It's my happy place. I go there, I work out, I push myself. I feel the pain in my muscles, and that's my therapy.
So even just like your time in the service, everything that you've done, because I also want to gravitate. I also want to do the whole transition, when you go out of it. But I want to talk about talk to us about, like, is there a story that you have for us that this is going to help with my segue in terms of where I want to go with when life hits you personally? So I want to talk about, like, do you have a story for us in terms of, toughness or where you needed grit or resilience, where all that training and stuff like that came into place. So then I can kind of segue to the whole, personal life, when shit hits the fan.
Yeah, there's like I've have a ton of like stories and moments and throughout my career, not only in the Marine Corps but in the Navy, where my resolve was tested, or physically. Or I think I'll tell you one, and I think this is episode 20 or 19 or 21 in the podcast. My first firefight. So you are at the pinnacle of your training and your career. You've gone on deployments. You've done training exercises. You've done operational readiness exercises. Med crews. Now you're in combat, and you haven't had a combat experience yet. And so my first combat experience was we were on our Humvees. We were on the northwest border of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. We were the first lead element for 2nd Marine Division. We went across the breach zone. We were out in front of the entire 2nd Marine Division, tanks on our ass, and we're closing in, and we can see Kuwait City in the distance. And we're just pushing, pushing, pushing. And we've got Iraqi soldiers surrendering to us. We don't even have time to stop. We hit different, milestones in our approach to Kuwait City, and we pull up on Kuwait City. We're about 10 clicks out, 10 kilometers away, and all of a sudden we just start taking a hail of gunfire. And I'm on the back of the Humvee. I'm on the 50 cal, and there's these high tension wires all through the desert, and we're right by high tension wires, and I can hear the bullets ricocheting 10 feet away, from my head. Bing, 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 bing. And all of a sudden, we're just firing, shooting. I'm on the 50 cal, shooting, watching the tracers go out, and can't really see what we're shooting at, can't see where it's coming from. And at this moment, I have no fear. I have been training for the past 5 years of my life, or 4.5 years of my life, and instinct just took over. It was, for me, that was when I realized and I knew that I had the resilience, the fortitude, everything, and I wouldn't cower under combat or stress. And it was about 30 seconds into the firefight, I looked off the Humvee and I saw on another vehicle about 20 meters away, somebody had jumped out of the back of the Humvee. They threw their M16 on the ground, and they were hiding behind the tire. I jumped off the gun, grabbed the A gunner. I'm like, get on the gun, and then ran over there and kicked this guy. And it was like, get in the fight. And started yelling at him, and he looked up, and it was a gunnery sergeant who had been, and if you read the book, had been just giving me shit the entire time on a deployment, and for alcohol and for all kinds of stuff. But I ran back to the Humvee, got back on the gun, and at that point they were like, "Cease fire, cease fire!" Everybody's like, "Stop, stop!" And we got on the radio and we found out that we were firing at 1st Marine Division's lead element. And I write in the journal, the world's most elite fighting force engages the most elite fighting force for 2 minutes of sustained combat, no MIA or no WIAs, no KIAs. And it really, for me, was like, two things happened. Number one, I'm like, I knew that at that point, I was, I would never break or under combat or stress or anything. So I had that resilience. And number two, I saw that how people were affected by it. Some people will instantaneously just go and do what they're trained to do. Other people are hesitant. And I saw that in Afghanistan a couple times, but I was able to see it through a lens where I was cognizant of what was happening when other people weren't. So it really gave me some really good insights, not only in the military, but in my personal life and my business professional life.
Yeah, you really learn a lot about yourself in moments like that. And also, it's amazing that you can observe yourself through that lens, right? And also, it's really cool that you can observe yourself through the lens now. Like you get to really, because you wrote it all down. Like you there's no, I'm recalling it from my mind. It's like no. Like I wrote it down. Like there's no way to miss this, it's like, which I think is really amazing. I want to then talk about personally, man, that has been through all of this and all of this training, and you can compartmentalize, you could be in the fight, you could let go of the fear, you could just put your head down and get it done through all trail and all this other stuff, right? Loss and, all that stuff. And then, in your personal life as a civil, now I want to go as a civilian, we're transitioning, to the civilian world. How different is it?
It's night and day. When you're in the military, you have that military identity. You have your teammates, your compadres, and you have that lifestyle. It's totally different. Now you get out of the military and things are, just different in so many different ways. So different 20 times, but you don't have those close personal bonds. You don't have those relationships. You don't have the support network of your friends. You're almost alone and unafraid. And then even if you're in a relationship and you still have your friends from college or whatever, it's a different type of relationship. And you find yourself losing or stripping away your military identity and then embracing a different identity and culture that a lot of people don't understand or recognize. So I can understand, and I've spoken with a lot of veterans and understand why they look at or they have a difficult time transitioning, and they sometimes have a hard time finding jobs or keeping employment, or they start drinking, or they succumb to addiction, especially with how everybody wants to medicate these days. And the first thing you do if you go to the VA and you're diagnosed with a mental health issue is they want to put you on medication. It is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to transition from the military and a culture and identity and get that stripped away and have to, just jump into a different life, different culture, different relationships, and understanding how some people struggle with that. Fortunately for me, I didn't really struggle with that so much because I still had my playing rugby and running triathlons and doing all the things. So my social network was more diverse and it really wasn't a singularity. That was kind of, for me, not as difficult. However, what happened later on was really probably the most challenging thing that I've ever faced in my life, including all my time in the military and 4 combat tours.
We'll talk about as much as you want to divulge, but what I really like that you said when we were talking prior was like, you can prepare yourself as you could be as mentally tough or mentally fit as you want. But when something very, very, very personal happens to you and it's a constant fight and battle, you're just never prepared. Right. And it eats at you and stuff like that. And I would love for you, if you can, to dive deeper into that and what exactly that means.
So I'll start off by saying that I had a difficult time talking about what I'm going through in the past, and I've gotten beyond that because I can't really tell my story with trying to hide it or trying to say that I'm tough or I've done this or done that. So if I really want to be authentic, I have to tell the story and be honest. And the story is that after I got out and retired from the military, I started my company and was running my company and loved it. It was awesome. Life was great. Waited till I got married because I did have those issues and relationship issues. I didn't get married till I was 40. And I thought I made the right choice. Got married for all of the right reasons. My ex-wife and her family fit the that construct that I was looking for, and got married and had kids, had the twins, and that was it. I was like, man, this is awesome. My identity had transformed to husband, father, and I embraced that identity and loved it. Raised my children, and then I did my third tour in Afghanistan. My ex-wife got pregnant. Wife at the time got pregnant, so we had our third child, my youngest daughter Samantha, which was a gift. Married for 11 years. I mean, everybody looked at my family and me and were like, "You are blessed. You have the house, you have the vacations, you have everything." The German Shepherd dog. I was giving news broadcasts on Fox News. I was traveling around the world with the business. Everything was awesome. Life was great. And out of nowhere, my wife at the time filed for divorce. She wasn't happy. That was a blow that I was unprepared for. But I was able to manage that. I was like, okay, I remember that I was, in the bedroom with her crying, asking to, make this work because of my childhood. And I didn't want my children coming from a separated family. Was I happy in my marriage? No. Was she? No. But did we work on it? I don't think we did. So what happened then was I love my kids and I'll never stop ever fighting for my kids. I love being a dad. I think the best role that I can play is preparing my children for life. And I love doing that, teaching them, being a part of their lives, mentoring them. I'm not their friend, I'm their dad. So what happened was the divorce was very contentious. And if I can give a piece of advice to anyone out there, if you're going through a divorce, put your personal feelings aside. If you have children, make them the sole focal point of this because your personal animosity will destroy that child's childhood, depending on their age. So my ex-wife gives me primary physical custody of the twins and keeps my youngest daughter for herself, which was totally a bad move, especially on my behalf. I took it like that. I'm like, yeah, give me the kids. I should have said no. I want all three kids, or I'm not raising two, and then you keep one. Separating the children from each other is just criminal, and it creates emotional and psychological things that were going to impact them the rest of their lives. And anyway, so I raised the twins, Ryan and Tabitha, by myself for a year. And I'm going through this legal stuff with lawyers and preparing for trial and custody and visitation. And this is probably where I can look back and say, I was totally unprepared. I don't care how many obstacle courses I've run through or how many times I've jumped in the water and the surf in Virginia Beach or North Carolina, or how many operations I've been on, for 20 days in a row out in the jungles in Central America or in the desert when I went 50 something days without a shower. I wasn't prepared for that at all. And the reason why is all of my training, it had an end state. I can go and I can kill somebody, or I can go fight somebody, or I can go do this. Here I am battling with lawyers and therapists, and I'm unprepared and not trained and not equipped and being pulled in 20 different directions. And that was probably for me one of the most difficult times leading up to what happened next. And I would advise anyone, going through this, and I talk about it in the book, education is the key, understanding things. And where you're coming from special forces or the military, it's easy because a lot of it is physical. I'm going to go do this, climb that hill, go do this. Where when you're dealing with things like what I dealt with, divorce and custody, it's more emotional and psychological. So let me get to the story, and then we can talk about, how it impacted me. And so I go to court, and I don't have a lawyer because I'm done paying an exorbitant amount of money for somebody to be a child coordinator, emailing lawyers back and forth when I can pick up the Tabitha, when I can pick up Ryan, when Samantha's coming over for visitation. And after a year, and thinking to myself, I'm raising two of my children by myself for a year. It was during COVID, homeschooling, this, that, all of these things. How could I ever be in a position where I would lose custody or not see my kids? I go to court and represent myself, which is the biggest mistake ever. If you're going through a divorce, don't represent yourself. Get a lawyer because you cannot prepare enough. Even as a businessman and intelligence officer, I got into the courtroom and it was a nightmare because, like you said, you're dealing with family, your children. It's just a totally different ballgame. What happens after 2 days of trial? The judge, who, by the way, his daughter was murdered by her male college roommate, and he has a history of some of the most egregious rulings imaginable. He gives, and now remember, there's no evidence or no even allegations of abuse, neglect, drug use, alcohol use, anything. The judge gives full legal custody of all three of my children to my ex-wife, who has a history of abuse and neglect. Limits my visitation to 30-minute Skype calls on Sundays, makes me pay $25,000 in legal fees, go through CBT, anger management training, do a full-up forensic psychological evaluation, and take a 14-week parenting course. I will share with you probably the darkest day of my life. I remember the judge issued his ruling, and it was like blasphemous how he delivered it and wouldn't even look me in the eye. And I turned around and there were like 10 bailiffs standing behind me. And I was like, what's going on here? And they kind of escorted my ex-wife and the kids out of the courtroom. And I had to sit in the courtroom for about 30 minutes as they, let her out and she drove home. And I'm standing there with these bailiffs behind me. And there's no doubt in my mind that if I had intended to, I could have just gone through all 8 bailiffs. I mean, that's the anger that I had and the rage that was inside me. But I sat there just stoic and silent. I drove home, and I remember bits and pieces of the drive that I just was almost in a state of shock. I did not know what had just happened. I didn't know how to process it. And I came home. My house was filled with my children's stuff, a battleship that my son and I were building together, my daughter's backpack from school that day. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I literally didn't know what to do. I mean, I can't describe the pain, the misery that I felt at that moment. And I sat in my chair in my living room and didn't know what to do for the first time in my life. My training, what am I going to do? Go pick up a gun and go do this? And I have no recourse. I was helpless. I was alone. And it was the worst day of my life. And I have been living that almost for 3.5 years. I will talk very openly about suicide ideation and suicide. I've heard so many people talk about it, and they talk about it in a way that's not genuine. They talk about it in a way that, oh yeah, I thought about this, or I did this, or I did this. And I can tell you, I can honestly say that I walk through my mind where I would take my gun and put it to my head and pull the trigger because I couldn't deal with the pain that I was experiencing. And not many people can talk about it in that way. They'll talk about it in like, oh yeah, I thought about it. I would do this. I mean, I could literally imagine myself and picture myself in doing that. I don't know how to describe the pain you feel when your children are ripped from your life. People have asked me to describe it. And when you watched episode 17, you thought to yourself, how can anyone go through that? And when you watch episode 17 and put in your mind that pain that 20-year-old Marine had felt, multiply it times 100, and you'll understand how I felt at that moment in time. So I'm sorry to take it down the dark path, but I want people to realize you can be the toughest, badass special forces guy. In all of this negative, and I've tried to channel it to a positive if it's imaginable. I now can take this and say that I'm a 10 times stronger person than I ever was. And I am going to be a 10 times better father than I was when my children are back in my life.
You said something that is really interesting. And I think that a lot of people can relate to it, not just anyone that's lost, anyone that's, unsure. Like you said, with all the training that I've done and everything, there was always an ending. It's like there was always an ending, right? With this, you don't know the ending, right? You're still in it, 3 years later, 3.5 years later. For what do you do for yourself, or what do you have for us that like where there is no ending, it's like you don't, or there is an ending, you're going to get an ending, right? But you don't know when that ending is coming, right? So how do you keep moving forward? I mean, you also not only are going through this personally, but you also are a businessman. Like you're also running companies and stuff like that. So how do you keep going?
Well, let me say that this has definitely impacted me and my business and my. I suffered a stroke last on Veterans Day last year. I had a rugby game. I came home and went out to dinner and had a stroke. The stroke was a result of the stress. I knew that after the stroke, I had to make some changes, and I took some time away from the company and just tried to recover from the stroke. And that's really where, to answer your question, I started thinking about how am I going to fight this fight? What am I going to do? What I was doing wasn't working. So this is where I'm talking about turning a negative into a positive. And what I've been doing is I've become an advocate for parental rights. I joined a 501c3 called Colorado Resilience, and I'm on their board. And it's about protecting children. I've created legislation from Robert Garza's legislation in Texas and introduced it to the legislatures in Virginia. I've become a voice. I've created a TikTok channel. And I'm now leading a group and participating with a group in Northern Virginia to change this. So what's my end state? It's twofold. Number one, I will be reunited with my children, whether it's a year from now, whether it's when they're 18, and I have to be a positive influence in their life. If I had blown my brains out, or if I had went and beat the shit out of a judge or a lawyer or been incarcerated, that's the wrong message to send. Or if I started drinking, or if I started doing drugs, I lose. My children lose. So my identity as father is bigger than my own personal pain and suffering. And that's what I use as that light at the end of the tunnel. And then helping other fathers and mothers, because there's mothers that are in our group in Virginia who haven't seen their children for 2 years and 3 years. I will always be resentful of the judge and what my ex-wife has done. But my success, my health, my happiness, and my actions will paramount theirs. That judge is going to have to live with his daughter's death and his egregious rulings the rest of his life. And that's going to eat away at him like a cancer. And my ex-wife is going to have to deal with the children asking, Mom, why didn't you let us see Dad for years when she could have? And she's going to have to deal with that. That's going to be her cross to bear. My cross to bear is being a great dad, a role model for my children, a leader for other people who are going through this, who don't have the strength, the resilience, or the fortitude. Because I have heard and witnessed several stories where men kill themselves, they off themselves, or they lose their homes, or they lose their jobs. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to be another statistic. I'd rather channel this and be a positive, and no matter how it's a terrible way to spin it, but how do I create a positive out of this? Do the things that I've been doing, and then going out and talking to other people about it. I can't give my message by not talking about it. I can't help other people with their pain or suffering by keeping it inside. And yeah, it's really difficult to talk about. It's like ripping a band-aid off and a scab ripping off and start bleeding every time I talk about it. But if I don't talk about it, how can other people relate? And how can other people go, shit, if he's going through this, I can do it too. Because as I told you, I'm not special because I was in special forces. I'm resilient because of my experiences. And I'm more resilient now than I was when I was in special forces. And if anybody can learn from that and gain resilience from that, it's a win.
So, what do you do on a daily basis, and what can our listeners do to build that mental fitness? Because it's not so much mental toughness, it's more mental fitness. You got to be able to, like you said, like push those resentment and all that stuff aside when you're getting into court, right? Or, you had to push that anger down to not get yourself in jail, right? You have to clear your mind to be able to get to work every day and be the best role model that you can be. And also with the job that you have and what you do, it's like, people are looking to you, right? And you can't, leaders need to lead themselves, right? Before they can lead others. And you're leading yourself every single day while going through the worst thing imaginable, your kids being ripped from you day after day after day, not knowing when you're going to get them back, right? You don't know when the light is in sight. So what do you do on a daily to, keep healthy to keep your mental fitness healthy?
So I'm consistent. Before I'm a human being. I struggle every day with things. There's great days, there's mediocre days, there's terrible days. I get a text message or email from my ex-wife and be like, "Oh, Tabitha's, has a swim meet and she can't do the Skype call tonight. We need to reschedule." And having that, this is what my time that I cherish with them, and then not having that, or my son's not on the Skype call, and she doesn't, I'm like, "Where's Ryan?" "Well, he's at camp." I'm like, "What's more important, having a relationship with his father, or you sending him off to camp?" So I struggle every day, and it is a constant struggle. But what I do is I remain consistent. I get up every day and I go to the gym every day. I mean, you start the day off and on a positive note, get your blood going, and there you go. Then there's certain things that I try to do every day. If I can put one or two or three things on my list and get a win every day, it's a good day. So I set kind of like goals or milestones throughout the day. Today I'm going to email my lawyer and I'm going to do this. Today I'm going to talk to the Wyoming National Guard about the project and do this. Today I'm going to talk to the group about why, or today I'm going to get on a call. I also help people as much as I can, and I get if I can help somebody, it makes me feel great. I am helping a Navy retired captain who's incarcerated in Virginia Beach Correctional Facility. He calls me every day, and I am helping him. The other day, there's this really cool guy, old guy, Rob, like in his mid 70s. He's has one leg amputated. He called me up the other night. He's like, "My taxi wouldn't come." I'm like, "I'll get you an Uber." And he's like, "Can you come pick me up?" Those are the things when you realize how important your life is to other people and you start giving more than asking, you're going to live a healthy life and a more happy life. Do I struggle? Yeah, I struggle every day. But if I can do something positive for somebody else in their life, man, it's a huge win for me. And then tonight I have a Skype call with my kids, and I can't wait to talk to them. I can't wait to be their dad. I can't wait to talk about the things that my ex-wife said in court last week about how my daughter is afraid of me and how my children think that I favor my oldest daughter the most. And I'm going to tell them how much I love them and how that I love them all the same, even though they're different. And I don't favor one or the other because they're better in sports or this or that. That's what gets me through. And it starts by getting up every day and going to the gym and then putting one or two things on my list that I want to accomplish.
Wow, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you not just being on the show, but being vulnerable to share the story, because I really feel like a lot of people can relate and hopefully get some value and insight to it, because it's just interesting because I've heard stories like this a lot this past month and the month is just getting started. So I just find it, it's perfect timing, really, I feel like. And I also feel like we're in this age where not only a two-parent household isn't popular anymore, but one parent being absent, not by choice. It's by the courts, by the vengeance from the other one. There's too much animosity, and I see it, and I feel like a lot of people understand and are also feeling it and going through it. And also it's good for other people that just to be aware, just to be cognizant, just stuff that you said, have a lawyer, put your emotions aside, it's for the children. So hopefully people will get a lot out of it. So I really appreciate you being here and being vulnerable and open and sharing this story.
I really appreciate the time. When we first spoke, I told you I don't really want to talk about special forces stuff and resilience. I truly believe in my heart that people are resilient by their nature, some more so than others. And it's when they're tested that the resilience comes out. In special forces, you're tested time and time and time again, and there's these certain circumstances. And the tests that I've had, like I said, were more difficult dealing with my personal situation and the situation with my children than anything that I faced. And I see people out there like Robert Garza and Marianne Petrie, and I can go through probably a list of 40 people that have gone through and are still going through situations like mine, like Deborah Walker, who her relationship with her daughter will never be the same. It's just terrible. I don't have a word for it. If I could go fight somebody and put me in a ring, in an MMA ring, I will destroy somebody to help somebody else. But I can't. That's not a tool in my toolkit. It's a lawyer or a counselor, and then you have to rely upon that. And if there's one theme I want to get across, it's that when you're walking through hell, don't stop. Just keep walking. Get up every day. Go to the gym. Go outside and go for a walk. I'm not saying you have to go, do 10 miles on a treadmill or go lift weights. Just go do something. Get out. If you're just going to perpetuate the depression and anxiety and stress and anger if you don't do anything. Try take a step. Next day, take 2 steps. Just keep making those steps. Be a role model for your family, your children, whomever. Just don't take the wrong path. Stay on the positive path and do something nice for somebody every day. If it's opening a door, smiling, saying hello, you're going to feel better. And those are the things that get me through. And I hope that this message finds people, touches them, and gives them some hope or some encouragement. And I don't plug my podcast or my book. I mean, if you want a book, I'll send it to you. But do watch episode 17 in the trailer because it will help almost anybody, I believe. And And Gina, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, giving me a voice. And if there's anything I can do for you, like I've said, let me know and I'll help you in any way I can.
That's so kind. Thank you. And seriously, everyone that's listening right now, when you hang up, if you have the time, 2 times speed it if you have to, okay? You don't have the time because it is worth the listen. Episode 17, The War Journal. Check it out and then check out the trailer as well. You may end up watching them all because it's really good. They're really interesting. And then check out the book as well if you like it, if you like that as well. It's really, really insightful, and I find it fascinating and fun. I wouldn't want to live through it, but I find it's entertaining for the person on the other side. And now that you get to actually hear or see whichever platform you're using, Jim, you get to put a face to all of this if you're going to read the book or if you're going to watch it. So thank you guys so much for being here, for listening. Jim, thank you so much again for being on the show. You're absolutely amazing. And please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member. The whole entire channel is completely free. You get chapters from the book. You get weekly challenges. We have so much goodies for you guys to help build that resilience, to help build that grit, to help keep that mental fitness in a positive mindset for when life throws you incredible, hard, insane challenges like Jim is going through. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all next week.